Who ate lunch? You all are very efficient people. You manage your time very well. See, I did not raise my hand. I'll figure out lunch some other time. I made sure that, one, I had the honor and privilege of introducing a friend, a colleague, and a shipmate, but I also wanted to be sure that I also could sit in the chair and listen to President Carter's remarks coming up. So, with that said, President Carter is the 17th president of The Ohio State University. He has been in that position about 2 years now. Before that, he had made his first foray into higher education out of uniform by being the president of the University of Nebraska also. But what's really cool about our relationship is he entered higher education years and years ago in the United States Navy. He had the honor and privilege of being the president of the U.S. Navy's War College up in Newport, Rhode Island. And then he had an even better bump there. He got to become the 62nd superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And by luck may have it, I was his relief. And as he transitioned out of his uniform and moved on to Nebraska and now moved on to the Ohio State University, I was that guy that came behind him to carry on the great work that he had done. So, Admiral Carter, Vice Admiral Carter, 38 years of very distinguished naval service, a fighter pilot, flew F-4 Phantoms, flew F-14 Tomcats, flew FA-18 Hornets, operational as operational can be. This guy, so we're gonna see him in a suit and tie, but this was an operational warfighter to his core. And 38 years of phenomenal service. And he continues to give back how many were in the room for the congressional panel? Okay, so you remember that dialogue we just had about AI, the intersection of it with modeling simulation, and there are a lot of questions about the application of AI in education. Admiral Carter is going to take us to the varsity level of that discussion and continue the dialogue and improve our understanding of it. But he's able to continue to give back to the future. I suggest, sir, you started that with your time at the Naval Academy with our young generation of undergraduates. You did that with all of your sailors and all the commands and the sailors that served under you, but now you're doing it at a much higher level. Without further ado, let me leave it at that and introduce my good friend and my colleague, Vice Admiral Ted Carter.
Admiral Buck, thank you for the very kind introduction, and it's great to be here with you as you lead this important modeling and simulation world. And this is, believe it or not, my first ITSIC to ever attend. And I know I'm just coming behind lunch, and there may be some more people come in, but I also know this is going to be recorded, so all 20,000 attendees here at ITSIC in 2025 will be able to pick this up and watch this. I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to have a chance for Q&A, and there are no questions off the table. This is a little bit of a provocative topic, and as Sean mentioned, my career spans 38 years in the Navy, flying in high-performance tactical jet aircraft. I flew off of 19 different aircraft carriers. I hold the American record for the most carrier landings in United States Navy history, making some of my carrier landings all the way until I was 53 years old as a two-star admiral off the oldest aircraft carrier we've ever operated, the USS Enterprise, and she was 51 years old when I finished my operational flying career. I've been a nuclear engineer, commanded a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, and as Sean mentioned, I've been in the higher education space, leading in higher education now for over 12 years. So I'm no longer a rookie in this space, even though I've only been at The Ohio State University for 2 years, and yes, we had a pretty good weekend this last weekend. We'll go into that a little bit later. But let me just frame this conversation first. When I think about where modeling and simulation has come, how long it's been involved, and what ITSIC is and does, this is really about taking technology and changing the performance of all mankind. And as somebody that is a student of not just naval history, but American history, world civilization history, we've got to go back and think of some of the most transformative moments in human history. Now, Sean mentioned I was the president of Nebraska, very ag-centric state, as is Ohio State. And my first thought about what has transformed us as a human race is the agricultural revolution. When we went from hunters and foragers to farmers. That was 11,000 years ago. 11,000 years ago. And this kind of similar conversation to this AI, and we'll talk more about what AI is and what it really means. Think about 1440, the Gutenberg press, the first Bible put into print. You know, from 1440 to 1500, just 60 years, 20 million books were printed. And if any of us were around then, the argument was the printed book is going to dumb down civilization. And all these people are going to lose jobs because the job market back then was for scribes and people that took the word, the studied word, and put it into written text. So going back over 500 years, whenever a new technology or a new concept came around, there was a lot of criticism. And then we think about all the things that have happened just in the last really 150 years plus, from the Industrial Revolution to the invention of flight, something that's really near and dear to us in Ohio. The Wright brothers, certainly, you know, when you think about 17 December of 1903, obviously Kitty Hawk, that first flight. But the prairie, where they actually took flight to that next level, right there outside of Dayton, Ohio, that really transformed almost everything that we think about and we do today. And then think about what happened in 1903. Nobody actually even saw the Wright brothers fly, really, in front of any kind of crowd until 1908 in France, then eventually down at Fort Myers in Virginia. Then the famous flight around the Statue of Liberty in 1909, where thousands and thousands of people saw it and they believed that flight was actually real. Again, it changed everything that we think about. By the way, really fun, interesting story. The military application of flight happened shortly thereafter. Naval aviation was created in 1911. And then the first runways that were ever built were designed by Orville Wright in the 1913s, 1914s. And Ohio State was one of the original 8 runways built to train the World War I pilots. Now, a lot of people might know that fun fact, but what you don't know is the site where that runway was, and by the way, it did teach hundreds of pilots their first flying in military application. After World War I was ended, that runway was taken down in 1920. Does anybody know what's on the site of that runway today? The most historic football stadium in the country, the Horseshoe. And Ohio State still remains only one of 3 R1 research institutions that still has its own operating airport and runway. So again, connected as a higher education institution to not only the invention of flight, to the Wright brothers, and all that's connected to it. You know, so many other things have happened that have transformed how we think and we do our business. You know, we can't help but, you know, talk a little bit about the statement by President John F. Kennedy that we're going to go to the moon. And then on July 20th, 1969, we actually go and land a man on the moon. The invention of the space shuttle. All the elements of what had taken us into space, and now we're thinking about going back to the moon. But that first time we went there, we landed on the moon with less technology and computing power that's in everybody's cell phone today. And as I think about some of the other most transformative things that have happened, you can't help but think about what's transformed our lives almost more than anything today, the internet. And the internet actually is tied directly to the United States military. The ARPANET, which really had its founding and its opening day on January 1st of 1983. So when we think about the founding of the internet, I know a lot of us can remember when we first got those AOL dial-ups, probably around 1996, 1997. The internet was actually being founded in that 1983 timeframe. And the first connection to the World Wide Web actually happened in 1988, but in the commercial world, it really started around 1991. And what did that do to change everything that we kind of know and understand today? It was really a communications connection. It's changed everything from supply chain. It's changed everything from how we buy and sell. And I mean, here we are in Cyber Monday. And Cyber Monday exists because of some of those things that the military had going on in the late 70s and then introduced in 1983. And then the military applications of these technological changes. Now, I'm of a certain age, that flying in an F-4 Phantom on board a World War II built aircraft carrier, the USS Midway, operating off out of Yokosuka, Japan, landing on an aircraft carrier in 1983 and 1984, in that early height of the Cold War, was a different animal. And as we're talking about unmanned vehicles, things that could possibly land on an aircraft carrier with nobody on the stick and throttles, I'll just tell you this one personal story. So young Lieutenant J.G. Carter is assigned to VF-161 on board the USS Midway. The test pilots from Pax River came out to Japan to test a new concept, this thing called the Automatic Carrier Landing System. It was the first time it was ever really being tested. It was being tested at sea. So guys like Frank Culbertson went on to fly the space shuttle. He was one of those test pilots. I was a naval flight officer, a radar intercept officer, as we called him in the F-4 Phantom, so I was the guy in the back. They didn't have any test back seaters, so when the test pilots came out, they said, anybody want to go with us and try out this new box and see if we can land on a pitching deck of a World War II built aircraft carrier that was built as a straight deck carrier turned into an angle deck, and see if we can land these F-4 Phantoms on board that flight deck, no hands on the stick and throttle. I was like, I'm going. So I have over 2,000 landings, 2,016 to be exact, but I have over 150 touch and goes that we don't count with test pilots who were not touching the stick and throttle in 1984. So think about that. 40 years later, we're just now getting to that level of machine learning, taking this new technology where we're going to be landing, and we already have done this, landing high-performance jet aircraft on the flight deck of aircraft carriers. And oh, by the way, they land on the exact same spot every time, every time. So there's tremendous amount of military application to what we've done into going to this level of new technology. But here we are today in 2025, and artificial intelligence is already here. You know, we're going to talk about where it might be going, but it's actually been with us for a while. In fact, I would tell you is probably the most important thing I'm going to tell you here today is I think AI as an acronym standing for artificial intelligence is improperly named. It's really augmented intelligence because there's nothing artificial about it. It's created by us. It's created by databases. It's created by doing high-speed computing. It's created with subsets of machine learning that all go into this big, giant umbrella of artificial intelligence. And we got to understand what it is and what it isn't. We got to understand that generative AI is not using a database to just come up with a solution. It's actually a novel way to approach it, come up with something new. This is where AI starts to be able to do some of its own thinking and produce something that the human hasn't actually come up with first. And for us at Ohio State, we have been studying and working on AI going back all the way to 2018. I took over on January 1st, 2024. We already had 300 researchers and faculty that were doing this work. You know, ChatGPT just came out a little while. By the way, ChatGPT is often confused with AI. Sometimes they seem to be synonymous with each other. That is just a tool. And when we're talking about implementing the principles of AI into the classroom and what we're doing, we're not talking about just giving access to ChatGPT for our students. By the way, every student in America already knows how to do that. And for those of us that are a certain age that are not used to using those tools, we're the dinosaurs because it's already being used out there. So when I took over as president at Ohio State, one of my charges was, how are we going to take higher education and truly transform it? So again, as a naval officer and somebody that's commanded ships at sea, I'm going to give you a running fix on higher education for just a couple minutes because we have to frame this. You know, I took over the Naval Academy in 2014. In 2015, the American confidence in higher education may have been at its height over the last 10 years. 2 in 3 Americans had high confidence in what post-secondary education was doing. That started to erode, though, mostly because of the cost. And as our government was spending more and more money on research, approaching $60 billion between National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, Ag, Department of Energy, Department of Education, the average American was saying, hey, if I'm going to go to an Ivy League school or private school, I'm going to spend somewhere north of $150,000 to $200,000 a year to get an undergraduate degree. Is it worth it? And for you R1 institutions, those top 100 institutions in the country that are doing almost 85% of all those research efforts, what have you done for me lately? What are you really doing for me as the average American farmer, nurse, practitioner, an engineer? Many Americans would say, I can't really say what the benefit has been to me. And then when COVID hit, all it did was accelerate this distrust in what higher education was doing. And I was at the University of Nebraska, one of those institutions where we really struggled with enrollment because there's only 2 million people in Nebraska, and there's only one public higher education system. You got the flagship with the Cornhuskers, we've got a great medical center, we've got a Metropolitan University in Omaha, and a rural teachers college in Kearney. But enrollment really became a challenge for us, and we actually increased enrollment during that COVID period, but many other public institutions saw that go the other way. And again, this level of distrust kept going in the American public. And last year, we hit our worst point. 36% of Americans said that they had trust only at some level in higher education, meaning that 2 out of 3 Americans did not have any confidence in higher education. I mean, that's a long, long way from the 1960s and 1970s where everybody thought as soon as you get out of high school, the best thing you can do for your future is go to college. And today, less than 50% of Americans out of a dwindling population that are finishing high school, because we are going through a smaller population of young people that are graduating high school because of lower birth rates that happened in 2007, 2008, 2009. We're seeing some of the lowest enrollment for higher education in history going back all the way to the 1980s. So that's where higher education is today. And who's struggling the most? It's the small, private liberal arts colleges that are charging north of $30,000 tuition. Now, fortunately for a place like Ohio State, we are the state's flagship. We are a land-grant institution. I have 67,000 students, 15 different colleges, 6 campuses, 8,700 faculty, world-class faculty, and a research arm that employs over 14,000 people and does $1.7 billion of research federal, state, privately run grants. We're a $13 billion a year enterprise. We're the largest employer, the largest business in all of Central Ohio. And as the state's flagship, just to give you an idea, and it has maybe something to do with winning a national football championship, that never hurts. But last year we had 88,000 applications for an incoming freshman class of 8,300. So we are not having a problem attracting young people who want to go to Ohio State. But that doesn't mean that we just sit on those laurels. You know, we're the number 15 ranked academic institution in the country. I'd like us to be just as good as academic at the undergraduate level as I am at football on the field, and we're working towards that. But I've had to hire 9 new deans in 2 years, a new provost, a new athletic director, new head of administration, planning, security, a new chief information officer. So we've built a team, and my mandate was to change the conversation about higher education. The provost that I hired, Dr. Ravi Bellamkonda, is a national, internationally known AI expert. He was a sitting provost at Emory University, a top flight private university in Atlanta. And we hired him and we put our heads together. We said, this is our opportunity. This is our opportunity to not let the world of AI drive us. We can drive it. So we are taking a comprehensive approach to how to implement AI at a university level like no one else in the United States or the world. So what does that mean? This incoming freshman class, the class that just started, okay, they're going to graduate in 2029. By that year, every single student, undergraduate, graduate level, PhD, will be bilingual. They'll be a profession in their academic discipline, but also be an expert in artificial intelligence as it applies to their academic discipline. Every single student. It goes beyond that. That means that we're also going to educate every one of our faculty members. I mentioned 8,700, one of the largest in the country, as well as all of our staff, to include our medical center staff. Every one of them will be educated in the principles of artificial intelligence so that they can better do their job. And we started this on 1 July of this year, and we're funding it. And to give you an idea, This is a $500 million level of effort over the next 5 years. We're not putting it on the backs of any of our students. There are no tuition rate changes, nor are we asking for any money from the state. We're taking care of this our own, some of it through philanthropy, but also by managing our finances so well that we think we can take, this is our largest, biggest, bold initiative that we can do as a university. Now, many of my colleagues in the American Association of Universities, the Ivies, the Big Ten counterparts, everybody's doing some subset of this. MIT, Michigan, Florida, they're all doing things in AI. Many of them are doing brick and mortar. We're taking it to the next level. So not only are we applying it to the people, we're also going to, well, we already have, we just recently stood up an AI hub. And the AI hub is actually AI to the power of X. So this is where we're going to put our top researchers so that anybody on our campus can now go in there, learn, get the resources they need to take themselves to that next level. And I mentioned that we had already had 300 faculty members that were world-class in artificial intelligence. We're now out there hiring another 100 AI experts to come to Ohio State. And that's on top of a $100 million level of effort for faculty eminence program to hire additional faculty at Ohio State. And again, just those things I described to you, if you're paying attention to higher ed, where many universities are shutting down PhD programs, they're laying off people, they're shutting down academic programs, we're doing the opposite. So we will have invested somewhere north of $1.5 billion in academic excellence to include AI over the next 10 years. And we already have it funded. So that size, scale, scope gives us a distinct advantage. And we want to make sure that we're leading out there. Now, as a land-grant institution, we also have a responsibility. I have a footprint in all 88 counties in the state of Ohio, mostly through the agricultural piece. But we also have a presence because of our medical center work that we do. We are also making sure that every business in the state of Ohio will have access to AI courses. And they're already online today. It's one of the first things we built. So when people are getting asked who's getting access, who's getting educated in AI, you don't even have to be from the state of Ohio. You can go on our website and get into some of these courses. And there's a cost to them, but they're almost done for free. They're just basically covering the basic costs. So those are the things that we're doing. Now, I want you also to know, because I already know the criticism, and that is if you're going to use these AI principles, all you're going to be doing is dumbing down the students. In fact, one of my premier faculty members wrote an op-ed today, it's in the news today, about how we're giving every student at the Ohio State University a lobotomy because we're going to go forward with these AI principles. So, of course, we're going to have critics. And yes, this is maybe a little bit risky to take this to this next level. But I also know in Central Ohio, one of the fastest growing areas in the entire country, we are actually designated as an AI hub for the nation. It has nothing to do with Ohio State. This is just the business aspect. Everything's changing. 2 years ago, 95% of all businesses in the country, to include the Central Ohio region, said that they would be using AI in their business. And yet only 5% were actively doing. This is just a couple years ago. Today, 40% of all businesses in the country today are using AI. I mean, that is a remarkable jump. 2 years ago, the United States was number 10 in using AI in the world. Today, we're number 1. We are number 1 today. UAE is number 2. Saudi Arabia is in the top 4. China is number 7. And if you're wondering why did the United States jump up so fast, depending on where you live, we have a preponderance of energy in this country. And that's something else that we're going to be working on to make sure that the energy usage and how we use it, as well as the ethical use of AI, is all going to be studied at Ohio State with solutions going forward. So this is an exciting time for what we're doing in higher ed. This will help answer the question for every growing business in the country when they say, I got a student that graduated from Ohio State. I don't need to send them to some course because they're working in the stock market in New York City. They will already know how to do that. They'll be ready on day 1. And we know that employers, because we're dealing with that, and by the way, one of the initiatives that we're doing is we're creating an internship program such that every single student at Ohio State will have a paid internship at the undergraduate level before they leave. And every employer knows what they're going to get because of this AI initiative. So if you're sitting there wondering, going, why Ohio State? I mean, aren't you guys just a good sports program? Why would Ohio State want to take this on? Well, some of this I learned a little bit because Secretary Carlos Del Toro actually hired me with a bunch of other experts to look at education across the Navy and the Marine Corps system. And through the year plus that I did that work, I saw a lot of trends in higher education. I also saw some needs that go beyond just the STEM-based fields, the medical fields, the engineering. Believe it or not, even in music, liberal arts, historians, everybody can be benefited by what we can do with AI.
The brilliant part of that is that I didn't have to pay him anything.
No, he got it for free. But why Ohio State? Well, first and foremost, because of the financial stability of The Ohio State University, which has to do with our Board of Trustees, the way we manage our budget, we are in a place that we can afford to do this. So that's first and foremost. You have to be financially strong and stable, and we are, and we will be going forward. The second is, we have empowered our faculty to do this. So this isn't Ted Carter going into those 8,700 faculty and go, you will do this. As we built out a 10-year strategy called Education for Citizenship, we put this in. And we wanted to make sure that the faculty were empowered to take on all these principles of AI and tailor it to their academic disciplines. So not every student will have access to AI tools for every exam. That'll be up to faculty members. Again, there'll be this requirement that every student will have some gen ed courses and some very tailored courseware for their academic disciplines. But the faculty will drive that, not administration. The other part is we have such great partners in Central Ohio. I mean, Intel, although they slowed up a little bit, there's a $26 billion investment in moving to Central Ohio. Anduril, which will be the largest drone company that will work with the Department of Defense and others. They're a close partner. They're putting their headquarters in Central Ohio. Honda, we've had a 25-year history with them. We have one of the largest transportation research centers of any university in the country that is almost akin to what I was describing in powered flight in the invention going back over 100 plus years. And there are many other companies. In fact, Central Ohio, particularly Columbus, which right now has a metropolitan population of over 2 million people, just the metropolitan area of Columbus, is projected to grow another 1 million people in the next 25 years. That would make it the fastest growing city ahead of Austin, ahead of Knoxville, ahead of, you pick any other city in the country, Phoenix, Columbus, Ohio. So why wouldn't you want to invest in what could potentially be the Silicon Valley of the Midwest in Columbus, Ohio? And then I mentioned our research arm. You know, we have the largest computing center in the entire state of Ohio. It's owned by the state of Ohio, and they're just now moving it to our ownership. It's 366,000 square feet of high-speed computing, and that will work for not only The Ohio State University, but for the entire state. In our innovation triangle, our innovation center, about 350 acres, which, by the way, just that innovation center is the entire size of the U.S. Naval Academy. We're building that out over the next 10 years. So it's one of those build it and they will come. We're going to be bringing industry at the next level. And that's on top of the $1.6 to $1.7 billion we're doing in research. By the way, that makes us number 11 in the country, ahead of Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill. That's Ohio State University. So that's why Ohio State is that institution in this era of higher education where people are questioning whether higher education is relevant, whether we can produce something that will be meaningful for this country. And I would submit to you that it will be the state flagship land-grant institutions that are answering that call. So I just want you to know how proud I am of the people I have that I've worked with. Maybe some of my thinking is shaped by the experience that I've had in combat. You know, I had this interesting flying career where I flew 3 distinct different generations of fighter jets, from the Phantom to the Tomcat to the Super Hornet. And to see that variation across the technological differences, then to command and rebuild a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and then have the opportunity to go into higher education. By the way, none of which I asked to do. This is how the Navy goes sometimes. But anyway, I want to say thank you for all coming here today. Thank you for allowing me to be part of ITSEC 2025. And with that, I've got about a half an hour to take questions. And I know we've got microphones here. I think Sean's going to help moderate here. And again, nothing's off the table.
put a face behind the question to Admiral Carter.
I didn't get around to doing a card, but that was a very fascinating talk, and thank you for your leadership, sir, in that very important area of AI research. So my first machine learning project, first of all, I'm Richard Boyd with Ultisim. This is my 22nd year here at ITSEC, admiring all the great work that we're doing here. But my first machine learning project was in 2009, so 16 years ago. And it was true back then that it was all about the data.
Yeah.
That was the biggest lift for all of us. So it's even more true today when we hear that something like, what, 80 to 85% of all AI implementations in businesses are failing because they have failed to curate and validate the data. So I'd love to hear about what you're doing at Ohio State around curating and validating the data you're using for your AI applications. And is there such a thing yet of a knowledge graph for Ohio State?
About a knowledge.
A knowledge graph, which graphs all of the organizational knowledge of those 15 schools you mentioned.
Yep, so great question and a great set of comments. First of all, part of my background that we didn't talk about here is I worked at Joint Forces Command. You may remember that was one of our 10 combatant commands, stood up in 1999 with only 1,000 people, the centerpiece of which was the Joint Warfighting Center. So I was the chief of staff there in 2005, and then I was a one-star admiral when Jim Mattis left and Ray Odierno came in, and we shut down Joint Forces Command with only 8 months to do it. But the point of telling that short history about Joint Forces Command is it goes back to machine learning, it goes back to the very beginnings of this thing called live, virtual, and construction. You know, when we're talking about modeling and simulation, this changed the whole way we think about doing large-scale exercises. It changed the whole way that we, of course, I go back to stir flying in the Phantom. Everything was in a simulator, even back in the 1980s. So, I was used to being in simulators to learn how to either land on aircraft carriers to do high tactical performance, shoot down cruise missiles, all those types of things that are very hard to replicate in real life. And then I think about what we were doing and what you're talking about with machine learning. We have evolved dramatically. In 1998, I was a brand new commander. I was about to take over command of a fighter squadron, and I was part of this thing called Joint Task Force Exercise 1998. Now, a lot of us in here will remember those big Joint Task Force exercises. We did them all live. We did multiple aircraft carriers and ships and bring in international navies. That particular year we had the 182nd Airborne pump out 3,000 men out of 80 different airplanes. It was the largest airdrop since World War II. We did that in an exercise. I still remember the brief. Vern Clark was Second Fleet, and the brief was, we only expect 1% injury out of these 3,000 people. So 30 people were expected to break a leg or worse. Planned, because we had to do everything live. Now there's a benefit to that, but as we've gotten smarter and better and use technology, and now these AI principles where we can bring in live, virtual, constructive, think about how much better we are now at red teaming, how much better we are at coming up with simulations and turning them around more quickly. We're on the cusp of something really, really new. And a lot of this came from some of the work that you've all done and what's been done in the work here. Now, to finish the second part of your question is we are measuring every outcome that we're doing at Ohio State. Everything that we're doing, we're creating new dashboards to measure our success of what we're doing in the classroom, what it means in terms of graduation rates, what it means in terms of success. We're even tracking what students do when they finish. Are they going on to more higher ed, or are they getting a job, and how much are they getting paid? We have not done that work at Ohio State prior to me getting there. And part of this will give us that return feedback loop to tell us whether or not we're teaching the right things and using the right methodologies, whether we're teaching the right things. Because universities right now are most often ranked on retention rates and graduation rates and some of those things, some of it's reputation. I would argue, as somebody that's been in the military that really cares about outcomes, we ought to be measuring what happens after you leave, not what happens while you're there. So this is a new view of how we're going to measure ourselves for success. Yes, sir.
Hello. Oh, hey, Scott Raymond. I'm with Orca Engineering, my second year at ITSEC. Love it. So AI is obviously changing the knowledge base of the world. I think it's Moore's law that says that everything doubles every 2 years or something like that. So how do you even make sure that the curriculum is going to stay relevant?
Yeah.
At the end of fourth year, what you learned in first or second year is no longer actually applicable? How are you doing that?
Yeah, this is the most difficult thing for higher ed to deal with. When you think about just higher education in general, you know, what we've evolved to, we believe in tenure, we believe in academic freedom, we believe in all of those elements, and they are important. But if I'm a professor and I've been teaching somewhere for 30 or 35 years, I don't like this conversation. I'm very comfortable teaching the principles of physics at the freshman and sophomore year, and don't tell me how to do any different. We're not good at being dynamic in higher ed. And higher ed has to look itself in the mirror today and say, you know what? Maybe there's a reason the American public don't think we're doing it quite right. We have to be willing to say, maybe we haven't gotten it exactly right. And maybe more importantly, we've got to be willing to say, we can dynamically change. Now, at a place like Ohio State, we're teaching over 2,000 courses. And we are right now going through a whole look at those courses and making sure that courses where we have almost nobody attending, why are we still teaching those? We can either blend them, drop them, and then create something that's more dynamic. And what's happening is the students are telling us what they want. They don't want to just become a mechanical engineer. They want a la carte. They want mechanical engineering. They want to be able to have a minor in some portion of AI. They also want to have a minor in French, and they want to go play the baritone saxophone. And they want to be good at all that. And we have to make sure that we can offer that to them all again within that package and make it affordable. So one of the most interesting things that I'll tell you about Ohio State, 57% of our undergraduates leave Ohio State today with zero debt, zero. That's 20% better than the national average. And those that leave with any debt, it's less than $24,000. That's at the undergraduate level. I'd ask you to ask any university president in the country, public or private, do they know that stat? Do they know what their costs are? And I just created 3 new scholarship programs so that if you go to Columbus State Community College and you get an associate's degree and you earn less than $100,000, I'll pay for the rest of your education. If you go to any of our regional campuses, which are open enrollment, you make less than $100,000, I'll pay for you to go to school, and I'll transfer you automatically after 1 year of good academic standing. And if you get a perfect score on your SAT or ACT, I'll take you to Ohio State, give you a full ride scholarship, everything, plus give you a $5,000 per year research stipend. We are changing the whole landscape of what costs. If you are Pell eligible and you come to Ohio State, we'll cover all of your costs. Even if Pell grants don't cover your tuition, we'll cover all the rest. And then on top of all that, and this is part of our strategy, we intend to be the #1 military-friendly university in the country. We're top 20 now, and what I mean by that is if you are in uniform and you're transitioning out, and you have 10 years of service, we'll take you at Ohio State, we'll finish your undergraduate degree in less than 3 years, and not one penny will come out of your pocket. I'll get you an internship, and if you're willing to work in the state of Ohio, we'll guarantee you a job. I don't know any other university in the country that's going to be able to match that. So those are some of the things that we're doing. Yes, sir.
Thanks. Nick Marquardt with Infinity Labs. Foundational to the field of M&S is the data. Kind of go with the data curation problem. A lot of times, as we work with the data and models, data aggregation becomes a privacy, security, all sorts of problems, right? 1 + 1 might be equal 2, but 2 might be classified. So what kind of work is academia doing to mitigate or look at some of those data aggregation problems to make sure when we develop unclassified agents, they don't provide classified solutions?
Yeah. So we're doing a lot there. It's one of the reasons I hired one of the top chief information officers, by the way, a Navy veteran. His name's Rob Loudon. I stole him from Indiana. And we're taking a look at that deep dive because you've got to have good data and it's got to be protected. I had a horrible experience in Nebraska where we had an intrusion into our medical center, exposed over 2 million records, learned a lot. Everybody in this room that has responsibility for managing data and securing it, this is a challenge. So you have to keep working at it. You can never assume that you have it right. So this is constant work. But it is an important part of the work. And I mentioned that Ohio Computing Center, the fact that the governor of the state of Ohio wants to have us take that over to not only manage it, best utilize it, but most importantly, protect it. So it's a really important part of what we do. And we probably don't talk about it enough, but thanks for the question.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Curtis Laborde. I'm from Applied Research Associates. So you mentioned earlier that y'all are going to be measuring like student success. Can you kind of go into a little bit on how y'all are going to measure AI integration and how that prepares students for the workforce? And will there be an opportunity for industry to partner with Ohio State to help shape this AI integration in your curriculums?
So let me hit the last question first. Yes, come find us. Come find, anybody either in my research arm, my provost, anybody in our academic side. You know, we're public, so all the emails are out there. I don't have to spit any out here today, and reach out to us. I will tell you right up front that Google, Microsoft, and Apple are all fighting with us right now as to who's going to get the best integrated deal with us. And we're talking big, big numbers because they see what we're doing. They know we're on the front cutting edge. And yes, we'll be able to measure all that. This is part of one of the reasons that we want to have this meaningful internship program. Today, about 70% of my students get an internship, some paid, some not paid. So we're not bad, but that's not good enough. And what I found was when I talked to my military learners, of which I have 2,400 military learners on our campus, almost none of them have an internship. And I was shocked at that because they're too busy going to school. Many of them had jobs already. I said, we've got to fix this. You know, I talked about how important it is to be military friendly, and I know I've got a lot of military in this audience. How many of us in uniform, when we got out, had to go through our VA disability ratings? How many of us have either had children or us ourselves have to go to that post 9/11 GI Bill to get our resources? No matter how much effort is being put in, and this is not a knock on the VA, it's a nightmare. And I read and read more about our veterans having to go and pay people to help them get their benefits for their VA disability rating. So one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with a small group of people right now that are creating AI-based tools that will change the entire dynamic of any veteran coming out of uniform. For free cost to veterans, they will be able to use an application and they will talk to an avatar that will know everything about them because they'll have access to some of the records if they're willing to give that up, get them their VA disability rating at a 95% effective rate on the first go. Guarantee them their, everything that they need for their post 9/11 GI Bill money, attach them to a university, make sure that they get their living stipend. And maybe the most important thing is this application will link them up to the best paying jobs, not just in the state of Ohio, but anywhere in the country. So we're in the process of building that. We're going to try to sponsor that at Ohio State. Jobs Ohio is also working on this. This will be revolutionary. It will change the whole dynamic for how we can do this, all using the basic principles of AI. And by the way, a Marine veteran is coding this application. Okay, over here.
Vice Admiral Carter and Vice Admiral Buck, thank you both for your service. It's been a pleasure learning from you today. My name is Sean Zen. I'm a master's student in computer science with a specialization in AI. I went to school originally to work at Newark out in Newport. And once the federal hiring freeze is over, I think I have a good shot at getting in. Given your experience down at the Naval College, I assume that you've had work over there at Newark and NAVSEA as well. What words of wisdom would you give somebody like me that's really trying to get in there, be productive, and be as efficient as possible?
So two things. One, continue to be an expert in your field. The more specialized you become, the more valuable you become. So find a niche that you don't think anybody else can bring. That's number one. And then number two is you have to find a way to get your resume and yourself out there. You know, a lot of people are using LinkedIn these days. We can argue about the success or the failures of people that actually find jobs through LinkedIn, but get your name out there. I mean, coming here and talking to people, there's a lot of employers around here, and it'll happen. So expand your network and then have people, advocate for you. And I guarantee it won't take long.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Hey, sir, my name's Second Lieutenant Luke Striegel. I just recently commissioned out of University of Iowa in May as an industrial systems.
Go Hawkeyes.
Go Hawks, absolutely. And I start this question off with a little story. So I remember my sophomore year when ChatGPT first went live, and I was walking past my roommate's room, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Striegel, check this out." And it blew my mind. I went upstairs and I did my operations research homework with it flawlessly.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, this could be a real problem down the line. And I found myself using it a lot, and then I found myself using it not at all, and now I think I've kind of struck a healthy balance with it. But there's an article a lot of people in here probably saw recently about I can't remember the exact medical terminology used, but something about how like the neural pathways and people who are tasked with the same, or three separate groups on the same task, one using generative AI, one using just traditional internet research, and one left to their own devices. The group that used generative AI to do this same task, I think it was writing an essay, showed the most decline. I don't want to say like they got dumber or anything, but they showed like measurable cognitive decline. So you mentioned you're taking a risk by investing so heavy into AI, and you had an op-ed come out that was critical of your endeavors. So at your echelon of decision-making as a university president, how are you addressing specifically for undergrads just how big of a vice it can be for students?
No, you're not wrong on any of that perspective. And thanks for sharing that you learned ChatGPT a long time ago.
A whole year ago.
Yeah. The truth is, all of that criticism is real. And we have to be honest and open enough to listen to it and then make sure that we're making adjustments. You're right. If we just go to ChatGPT and expect it to come up with the answer and constantly go to it, you're right. We're going to slow down. Our job in higher education is to make sure that we are still giving every student the skills to do critical learning, the skills to have open debate, make an argument, even when you don't agree with what others are saying, but also know that these tools are out there, and it is a tool. You know, I'll give you an example. Our medical center is huge. 1 in 4 Central Ohioans use our medical center. The administrative processes for how we bring in a patient, take care of them, do the records, it's onerous. We brought in a couple of very basic AI tools for our clinicians to use, and in 1 year, we've saved over 12,000 clinical hours. That means our doctors, our nurses, our clinicians are getting more direct time with the patients. That's just one example of a tool. If we were to equate that to what ChatGPT is, I'll take that all day. And by the way, it didn't replace anybody's job. Those people still have the jobs. They just did them so much more efficiently because of these new tools. So we're trying to make sure that we're applying some of these things across all of our administrative processes. I'll give you another great example. Again, this is a medical example. For certain types of breast cancer and for breast cancer survivors, there's these images that are created that people have to read with these markers to make sure that the cancer doesn't come back. We've just now started using, in the last year, this AI tool that is 100% accurate. Again, based on everything that we have to have. We have to make sure the right imagery, the right database, but it can do things so much better and more accurately than the human eye that this will change and save lives. So there are so many examples of this, and if we were to just say, you know, there's so much downside to potential misuse of AI, guess what? All that's going to happen, and it's going to happen anyway. So this approach is actually trying to take a proactive, control the narrative, control the outcomes, but not be blind to some of the challenges that are out in front of us. I think I have time for 1 or 2 more.
Very nice to meet you, sir. My name is Rocky Shah. I am a Buckeye.
Yay,
wait.
Go Bucks.
Yeah, great game Saturday, so very exciting time for us, of course. But I own a tech company now. We're in the modeling and simulation environment. I wanted to know how can different companies, my company and others here, engage Ohio State and bring more internships or opportunities?
Yeah, so you know, I mentioned this internship opportunity. It is the most complicated thing that we're doing. It's more complicated than creating AI academic material, because I had 16 different entities managing 67,000 students, mostly through the individual colleges. And where we realized we were falling short is companies, whether it be small, medium, or large, how do they know where to inject? How do they know to go in and say, hey, I've got 2 internship opportunities, and how do I create what I'll call this eHarmony approach to the students looking for internships and the employers who say, I have availability. So we're in the process of getting through that now. We just opened up a centralized shop. And again, if you go online to any of our programs, you'll find there's an inject point, and that's the thing we're trying to do, create a one path for businesses to come in and say, hey, I've got something for your students, and it doesn't even have to be in the state of Ohio. It could be outside of Ohio. So check us out. Okay, I think this is the last question of the day.
I'm Captain Katie Ireland of the British Army. I'm in the Educational and Training Services part of our organisation, and I'm doing quite a lot of work into assessments. I'm interested to know if universities are using AI to assess students, or will look to do that in the future. So if essay writing is becoming a dead art, can AI be used to assess people going forward?
Yeah. So as we're learning, again, the military tends to be out in front in using these type of technological advantages. And our friends from the UK and Australia, we're already doing exercises using AI across everything from speeding up assessment to putting in injects for, again, red teaming, and it's proving incredibly effective. I believe that industry, higher education will eventually get to those tools, but I think we still have a lot more to learn there. I don't think we're ready for that yet. You know, the privacy concerns and all the rest of that start to get in the way of that, but I'm not saying that we won't get there. This is where I think the military is just that much out in front, and just like the military taught us about the internet, taught us about so many of these other technological advances, I think that will happen in this case too.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everybody. You've been a great audience, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Admiral Carter, thank you very much. We were lucky to have that dialogue, and I imagine we could have gone on for hours and hours. What I would commend you to do is to share the video of this amongst all of our industry and our friends and our partners, and we can probably continue the dialogue online.
Yeah. Oh, and go Navy, beat Army.